Hi folks, Mark from Mark Kelly Farms. We're back out here in the shop today. It's a little cold to be out here in the shop, and that's why we are building one of these. This is going to be my new wood shop heater. Take the chill off the shop so I can come out here and actually do some work and use these tools. But it's just an old propane tank. You can probably find one laying around that somebody will give you. And I know you're scared of propane and you don't want to be cutting holes in propane tank because you think you're going to blow up. I used to feel the same way until I knew better. This tank's been sitting out in the weeds forever. It was wide open to the air. And anybody that knows anything about propane knows propane boils off at pretty much room temperature. So if it's in the open air, it's going to turn into a gas instead of a liquid, and it's going to be gone. And people say, well, I can still smell it in the tank. Well, you're not actually smelling the propane. You're smelling the additive that they put in so you can actually smell it, because propane is odorless. And if it's odorless, it's really dangerous because you don't know when you got a leak. So that's why they odorize it. But it's fairly safe, even though with that knowledge, I still tend to play it a little safer. What we do is we get like a whole bottle of Dawn dishwashing liquid, and we'll dump it down into that hole, and then we'll fill it full of water, and you'll get all kinds of suds and foam and everything else. And, once it's fairly full, it had a gigantic weird apparatus in this square hole here that I cut out. So while the water level would say up to here, I cut that big square hole out. So there's not really a lot of expansion room in there with all that water. So even if it was to flame out, it's going to blow out that little hole. Just keep your face away from it, and make sure you don't lose your eyebrows if you did have a problem. Where people run into problems, a lot of times they'll use a barrel, like one of the big 55-gallon drums, and it'll have like an old petroleum product or something in it, or residue of it, and stuff that will fume up. And those fumes are what are going to kill you. So if you're going to be doing one of those barrels, make sure it's thoroughly rinsed out. And I would also fill it with water before you cut the top out of it. Fill it within about an inch of the top, and then cut the top out, dump the water out, and then it's going to have such a big hole you don't have to worry about it, because even if it flashes, it's just going to catch on fire and it's not going to blow up. But this is what we got for the start. Found some old pipe out back, making the legs on it. I always go with 3 legs on stuff like this, and reason being because it's self-leveling. If you've ever had like a 4-legged table or something at a restaurant that wobbles on you all the time, drives you crazy, if it's got 3 legs, you won't get that. With 3 legs, it's going to level itself, and it's not going to wobble. And with those legs, to get them all the right angle, what I did is I cut this little piece of wood, and I made it so I could get the same angle on all the legs when I welded them on. And then to find the right place to put them, all you have to do is, this tank is 24 inches in diameter. So to find the circumference, which is the distance around the tank, you take the diameter, which is 24, and you times that by pi, which is 3.14, and you come up with a number. It was 75 point something. So I divided that by 3, because you got 3 legs and you got 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and it came out to 25 1/8. So I got my flexible measuring tape. You can use one that your grandma used to use when she was doing sewing dresses and stuff. Those are real handy. And I just marked around the tank every 25 1/8 of an inch, and they're evenly spaced all around the tank. But the next step is we'll stand it up and cut a door. So we got it stood up. I also flattened out the bottoms of those pipes because they were round. They need to be on an angle to fit straight on the floor. There's 2 ways you can do that. While I had it laying down, I just put a straight edge across and just kind of made a mark what would be flat on the floor. Or if you've been doing this long enough, if you got 2 legs down and 1 leg up, You can just eyeball vertical as you're doing your cut. I do it with a 4.5 inch grinder with a cutoff wheel. And you can just eyeball vertical and cut them off. And you could put little foot pads on those, but it's going to be on this concrete floor, so I'm not going to worry about it. But it is sitting level. And we'll get a door cut in this thing. It had the original valves in the side over here. All the different fittings and connections and stuff. I think I'm going to leave those because I kind of like the old steampunk look that they got. Kind of looks more industrial. I thought about even faking some metal rivets like around the top and stuff. But I can always do that later with the big door and it's not a problem. Obviously we're going to patch this hole here with probably a piece of 1/4 inch plate. And we're going to put the door on this side. The reason I'm doing that, because you got 2 legs here, and I'm going to put it kind of right in the middle of those 2 legs. So you're walking around it, you're not kind of tripping on the legs or anything. It looks a little better. But let's get that door cut. So we got the door laid out. What I did is just grab a level, put it on its vertical plane like this so you can get the vertical. Put it on the side of the tank and mark your side. Figure out how far you want to go around. I just kind of eyeballed it. Same thing on that side. And then I picked up one of these welders and pipe fitters wraps. Pretty handy. It's got a lot of calculations and stuff for doing round pipe, stuff like that. Decimal equivalents. A lot of good information on it, but as you wrap it around the pipe, it gives you a nice straight edge. So I did that top edge, and then I just measured down 12 inches and marked the bottom. And well, I'm going to cut this out with the plasma, so I'm going to get that set up and get her going. Okay, we got the right side of the door cut, and we're going to have the door open left to right. And this is where we want to stop for a second. And there's a little trick I want to teach you. The reason we only cut one side is now we're going to actually weld the hinges on. So I got these weld-on hinges from the farm store down there. I'm going to use 2. And we're going to weld those on. Make sure they're straight with your cut. Either line it up here or line it up on that side. It really doesn't make a difference. But before you... I'll weld the right side up first. And before you weld this left side, make sure you take any play of the hinge out by pulling the left side down. And that way when the door weight gets on it, it's not going to drop down any further. So by doing this, when you cut the other 3 lines on your door, it's going to be hanging already where it's supposed to be. It's not going to move, and it'll be hanging perfectly in the hole. Unlike if you were to cut that whole thing out and then try to weld the hinges on and get that door straight back in the opening, it's going to be really tough. And you'll probably have to sand it here and there to get it to be able to close. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right, we got the hinges welded on, and we cut out the rest of the door. You can see my top and bottom cuts aren't quite as good as my vertical cuts, because I had to freehand those. I don't have a flexible straight edge I can run the plasma against, but it works. And the door swings out perfectly, and it's perfectly aligned because of the last little trick that we showed you. Got even gaps all the way around, and that's what you're looking for. And some of you might say, well, you got a plasma cutter, it's what makes that easy, but I didn't always have a plasma cutter. For the longest time, I just used my 4.5 cutoff wheel to cut those holes. You can do the same thing. You can even do it with a torch, and you can use a straight edge with a torch, just like with the plasma. These plasma cutters are kind of expensive when you buy them new. This is the Power Max 45 by, I think it's Hypertherm, something like that. And I did not buy it new. Yeah, Hypertherm. But it's a good little tool. I got a sweet deal on it because a buddy of mine has a business, and he's rocking and rolling all the time and got to get stuff done quick. And this thing broke down on him, and he didn't have time to mess with it, just went and bought another one. So he sold it to me for a sweet deal, $300. And anybody that's priced one of these things, that is a sweet deal. And all it was a $25 trigger. Took it in at my local welding supply that serviced those models. $25 trigger with labor, $50 labor, $75, $375. I got that machine. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to line this door with some flat iron to kind of close those gaps up, which you probably wouldn't need to do because when this thing starts cooking, it's probably going to be sucking air through those gaps instead of pushing smoke out. But we're going to do that anyway. And we're going to cut a hole, put a little handle in here. I'll show you how that works after I get it in. So we got some flat bar 1/8 by 1. The door is 12 inches long. We cut it 13 inches because we're going to hang it over a 1/2 inch all the way around. This piece that comes across the top is going to hang over a 1/2 inch here. So we'll get that piece welded in on the outside. The reason we don't put them on the inside is, one, it's hard to weld unless you got a big hole in the back, which I've seen people do, and then just weld it back in. But because this is flat bar and this surface of this is round, it'll kind of tend to hold your door out a little bit because it's going to stick out a little bit. If you put it on the outside, you really don't have that problem because it'll lap over when the door's closed. So I'm going to get it welded up, and I'll get these other 2 pieces on, and then we'll come back and we'll put the door latch in. Okay, we got the outer strips welded on the door, and we got the door latch in. This thing just flips up, and it's just kind of a little over 90 on the inside. It just grabs the inside of the tank is all it does. Just make sure you flip it down when you close the door, and then you can tighten it up. Keeps the door closed real nice just by the weight of the outer handle there. And you could put a little curly Q thing, get fancy on that outer handle, but I always just use gloves when I'm tending the fire anyway. And you know what they say, you either know how to weld or you know how to sand. I do a little bit of both. But I think the next thing we're going to put the stack in. Okay, we got the stack on. Boy, this project has really let me know I need to work on my stick welding skills. I don't have my tank yet after the move for my my MIG welder, so usually MIGing, but I need to brush up on this anyway. Anyway, we've got the stack on, and what we ran into, we already knew about it when I bought the pipe. Most of the pipe is ID measurement, like 6-inch ID instead of OD. And this pipe was not going to fit our stove pipe. So what we did is we cut a slit out of it, cut a little section out of it, squeezed it back together, and then I welded the inside in there. And now the stove pipe slips right over it nicely. So that worked out well. We're going to probably plug this hole down here next. I need to get a little pipe plug to plug this one hole here. I think the other ones are all closed off. And I am going to leave those because I like the look of it. It's pretty crazy. And then we're going to put an air intake down here on the bottom. Probably going to be the same size pipe, but I'm not going to have to cut it down or anything. I like to have the same size opening for the intake as I do for the drafting out of the stovepipe. That way it pulls plenty of air. And we'll probably put a flapper valve down here to control the airflow into the firebox. A lot of people put a damper up here, but I like to keep that as open as I can, and I can control it with the air going in. I keep that wide open. The reason I set it back like this, I was going to have to put it at an angle anyway because of my roof in the shop. And then that way up here on top I can set a little coffee pot or something to make my coffee out here. I'll go buy me a cheap little percolator. But that'll be cool. We'll be back after we get some of this other stuff done. All right, we got the air intake made. Just opens up, closes. Doesn't go all the way around because it's off center. If you wanted it to go all the way around, which is really not necessary, you'd have to cut a slot in that disc and put it dead in the middle. Because it's off to one side, it'll only go over about that far. But it closes off completely that way. You can open it wide open. And I just made that disc. That's out of the old guard that was around those valves on the tank. It's probably 12 gauge material, plenty big enough. Use what you got. All right, we'll get the hole cut for this and we'll get this welded in. I'm going to put it vertically like that, so there's no weight issues with the handle. Because if you were to put it like that, it'd want to fall all the time and wouldn't stay where you wanted it. If I put it like that, it'll stay in any position that I put it in. All right. All right, it ain't pretty, but it's in there. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with this. I'm sure I'm not storing my rods right or something. It's pretty cold and probably moist out here. And I know you're supposed to keep them warm and dry, so maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, it's in there and it works. We are almost ready to fire this thing up. I'm going to patch that area in the back and we're ready to throw some wood in it. We're doing the test run today. Just put the pipe out the door because too much snow on the roof to cut a hole in the roof. But looking pretty good. Fired up real nice. Trapped in air real nice. It's already taken the little chill off the shop. We'll see how she works. Little update video. You can see how clean this thing is burning because of the fuel and air ratio, because of that big vent we put in. It is currently 18 degrees outside out here, and there's water coming off the full length of the shop. It's already 40 degrees in the shop. And you can see the snow on the roof. It's melting clear across the roof. Pretty crazy. I'm thinking this is going to work. Catch you later. $60 degrees.